Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're diving straight into a massive, honestly kind of fascinating disconnect happening right now in the battery storage industry. If you follow the energy transition or EVs, you've probably felt that whiplash, right? Like Monday, you're reading about this miracle breakthrough that's going to totally change the world. Then Tuesday you look at what the major utility scale developers are actually buying for their massive grid projects, and it's a completely different story. So, we're going to dig into the technical reports and market projections together today to figure out what is truly happening behind the scenes in utility-scale energy storage. Let's start right out of the gate with this incredibly telling quote from our source material. It says, "The solid-state battery hype dominates the headlines, but the commercial reality on the ground tells a very different story." I absolutely love framing it this way. It just perfectly captures the whole myth versus reality dynamic we're exploring today. Because let's be real, it's so easy to get caught up in the pure excitement of next-gen tech, especially when it promises these massive world-altering leaps in performance. But as we dig into the numbers, we're going to see that what makes for a jaw-dropping media headline doesn't necessarily translate into a reliable, multi-megawatt energy asset. All right, Section 1, solid-state hype versus reality. Let's get into it. So we really need to establish the stark difference here between public perception and actual on-the-ground industry behavior. While solid-state tech completely captures the imagination, it literally dominates media headlines with promises of lighter, vastly more energy-dense batteries, the reality in the boardroom, completely different. When developers sit down to plan these multi-megawatt grid projects, the conversation starts and ends with LFP. The people who are actually writing the checks and building the physical grid-scale infrastructure are intensely, almost exclusively focused on LFP. That is exactly where the real money is moving. Moving on to Section 2, the gigafactory capex roadblock. Now, the crucial question here is why? Why is there such a massive disconnect between the lab and the boardroom? Well, it all comes down to the core financial problem that's preventing the adoption of new battery tech right now. The underlying science of solid state, it might be totally incredible, but the barrier to entry is the physical manufacturing itself. Transitioning a facility from producing LFP to solid-state electrolytes, well, it's not exactly a simple software update. It requires colossal capital expenditure, or CAPEX. Just imagine spending billions to perfectly tune a massive gigafactory, optimizing every single step of the supply chain, only to be told, hey, you need to rip out all that specialized equipment and essentially start from scratch to retool the production lines. It's a huge roadblock. Which leads us directly to this incredibly blunt, undeniable assessment from the market reports. Solid state is currently a financial non-starter. Wow. When you really dig into the balance sheets alongside these developers, you realize the math just completely falls apart for solid state at this scale right now. You see, utility-scale developers are managing assets that operate on strict 5 to 10-year horizons. When you factor in the massive capital intensity required to fundamentally change how the batteries are actually built, the numbers simply do not work. You absolutely cannot justify those staggering transition costs for a grid-scale project today. It's just not financially viable in the near term. That brings us to Section 3, LFP and the 2030 roadmap. This is where we see a fascinating pivot. If solid state is a total non-starter for these massive projects, what exactly are developers locking in? Well, the year 2030 is incredibly significant here. Think about how fast technology usually moves in our daily lives, right? Your phone is obsolete in a couple of years. Now realize that for utility-scale developers, the technological roadmap through the year 2030 is already completely frozen. No way are they waiting around to see if solid state becomes commercially viable. They have decisively made their choice for the rest of this entire decade. And you guessed it, that frozen roadmap is built entirely on optimized LFP. The industry is currently locked into a scale-driven efficiency model, and honestly, it is a powerhouse of economics. They have built the gigafactories, they've smoothed out all the global supply chains, and as a result, the marginal cost of LFP just keeps relentlessly falling. Every single time they produce another batch, they get slightly better and slightly cheaper at doing it. It's actually very much like the relentless cost curves we saw with solar panels over the last decade. It creates this compounding loop of manufacturing efficiency that a brand new technology, no matter how amazing the chemistry might be, simply cannot compete with right out of the gate. Okay, let's jump to Section 4, Chasing Bankability and LCOE. To truly understand how these multi-megawatt decisions are made, we have to look at the fundamental economic metrics. In grid-scale energy, everything literally lives and dies by LCOE, or levelized cost of energy. Developers aren't out there hunting for a theoretical energy density. No, They are obsessively searching for the crossover point where the total cost to build, operate, and maintain an asset over its entire lifespan hits rock bottom. Basically, whichever technology offers the absolute lowest reliable number over 10 years wins the contract. And right now, LFP heavily dominates that exact calculation. So this creates a pretty stark trade-off. Look, solid state is an incredible innovation on a laboratory workbench, for sure. It offers unprecedented energy density, but grid-scale projects, they require commercial-grade bankability. That means being able to walk into a major bank, show them the technology, and easily secure hundreds of millions of dollars in loans because the asset has proven rock-solid operational predictability. Trading that financial security and commercial predictability for a mere boost in energy density will actually scratch that. It's not even a trade. No developer managing a balance sheet is willing to make that bet today. When you stack these two against each other side by side, the huge disconnect we talked about at the beginning makes total sense. On one hand, optimized LFP benefits immensely from rapidly falling marginal costs and proven predictability for those critical 5 to 10-year asset horizons. On the other hand, solid state is currently sidelined by the massive capital required for gigafactory retooling and its unproven commercial reality at this massive scale. At the end of the day, the balance sheet simply does not support the media hype. Which leaves us with this final, incredibly thought-provoking question straight from our source material. Are we ignoring innovation, or are we just maturing? It's remarkably easy to look at the industry's refusal to rapidly adopt solid state and assume they're just being stubborn or anti-innovation. But perhaps this frozen roadmap, this intense focus on bankability over shiny new lab results, isn't a rejection of innovation at all. Maybe it's just a sign of the renewable energy sector finally growing up. It's replacing pure hype with reliable spreadsheets and theoretical maximums with dependably falling marginal costs. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep this reality check in mind the next time a battery breakthrough dominates your newsfeed. Catch you next time.